At the company's celebratory dinner, the usually meticulous Ethan naturally placed the shelled crab meat onto his executive assistant's plate. I didn't question him. Instead, I just set over 30 crabs in front of him, telling him to handle them all at once. The following day, she slapped the divorce papers right into his hands. Honestly, I can do without people. When it comes to money, don't think you can snatch a single dollar away. I told Ethan as I watched him helplessly and expertly crack open a crab, peel the meat, and then arrange it on the assistant's plate. Ethan kept moving, his lips curling into a slight smirk. Suddenly, it clicked why such a significant dinner was held at Lakeside Mansion. The funny part is, when I saw the venue he sent over that afternoon, my heart felt all warm and fuzzy. I love eating crabs. I genuinely thought he picked it for me. She even got all dolled up for it with real enthusiasm. The silk gown on me, the jade necklace around my neck, the flawless hairstyle and makeup, all mocking my self-indulgent vibes. Ethan seemed to catch my stare and turn to meet my eyes. He looked a bit flustered. Hey, don't overthink it. Sophie hurt her hand a few days back. She hasn't really had crabs, so I just helped her out. I didn't say anything, just spun the dining table and placed a big plate of crabs in front of him. Ethan shot me a suspicious look while cracking crabs. I shook my long nails and flashed him a smile. I get you just helped her crack a crab out of convenience. Look, I'm kinda stuck too, so why not help me with a few? Sophie's voice was soft, her face showing hurt and innocence. It's all good. I noticed the reluctance flicker in Sophie's eyes and slowly said, it's just crabs. It's not like we can't afford them. Since Mr. Ethan is just sitting here, let him serve us all. After that, I turned to my assistant and asked her to grab 20 more hairy crabs. Ethan, you're not just going to serve Sophie and leave the rest of us hanging, right? Everyone was waiting for his reaction. I raised an eyebrow at Ethan. Eventually, he gave in, set his chopsticks down, picked up the crab tools, and then lifted his wine glass to toast everyone again. That night, Ethan peeled more than 30 crabs by himself, his hands punctured with countless tiny holes. Everyone there had more than one crab that Ethan had personally cracked open. That's more like it, can't be so biased, I thought. When he got home, he held up his swollen fingers and rarely tried to act cute with me. Hey, look, I really listened to you. Bang! The door slammed shut against his nose, heavy and forceful. Filthy dude. Ethan prides himself on being a hardcore germaphobe. He never parts with his disinfectant spray and steers clear of places with dodgy air quality. The only spot at home where you can eat and drink is the dining room. Not even a water glass gets placed in the bedroom. His utensils must be sanitized if touched by others, and that includes me. He never eats anything that would dirty his hands, especially hating shrimp, crabs, and shellfish. Clearly, I love freshwater and seafood the most, yet I can only quietly eat plain white rice with him while he scowls in disgust. Many times I wanted to eat crab. He'd frown coldly and say, "Those are just sea bugs. Seeing them is gross." He added, "We don't need to force each other to like stuff we hate." But now, he not only doesn't despise those bugs, but he's also using his hands, constantly disinfecting them at the slightest sign of dirt, to peel off the shells for others and remove their gills. He lets the stubborn, fishy smell stain his hands, not caring that the unclean crab shells pierce his fingers. His crab-cracking moves are professional and skilled, with the meat neatly arranged on the plate. You can't master this without dismantling dozens of crabs. He lets the tough, fishy smell mar his hands, not caring that the unsterilized shells pierce his fingers. I grabbed a bottle of yogurt and sat dazed on the living room sofa. These past 2 years, I've been super busy, attracting investments, recruiting talent, endless work calls, and subtle digs and mutual probing at dinners. Ethan had very little energy, so little that he didn't even notice the person beside him had already withered away. Suddenly, the study door swung open and Ethan rushed out, hurriedly buttoning his shirt messily. I tapped the yogurt bottle on the table's edge a few times, thud, thud, thud. He glanced up and saw me on the sofa. His footsteps paused for a second. Then he quickly said, "Sophie's got a stomach issue. I'm taking her to the hospital. You should get some rest." He was like a gust of wind, disappearing in a flash. His legs were insanely fast, but the shirt button was crooked. Looks like he was really in a rush. After all, he usually takes great care in matching his cuffs and tie before heading out. I suddenly remembered when I was hospitalized for appendicitis surgery. He coldly told me over the phone, "The nurses take better care of you than I do." Oh, there are so many germs in the hospital, and I have to disinfect everything when I get home. Being there for someone like this is just self-indulgent. It really means nothing. Turns out it's not that you can't, but that you're not worthy. I was just thinking, maybe I should reflect on my own reasons too. Looking at it that way, I think I'll pass. I don't plan to be the one who gets picked after weighing the pros and cons, reluctantly chosen in the end. I stood up and walked straight into Ethan's study. Since he's unkind, I can't be blamed for taking his benefits. I'm someone who repays even the slightest grievance. If he makes me uncomfortable, then he shouldn't expect things to be easy either. The computer screen was still on. I casually opened WeChat, and the chat history between Ethan and Sophie was extensive, going back years. She's the life assistant I hired for a few product researchers. Sophie really did a great job, and those few people praised her endlessly. She also took good care of Ethan simultaneously. One salary, two jobs, truly hardworking. Ethan's attitude shifted from politely declining to later accepting gladly. He'd take time out of his busy schedule to go with Sophie to the bustling, trendy night market. Sophie chatted away on WeChat, asking him questions. "Is the fried pork chop good? Just take a look. Haven't you tried it and found it super tasty? That takoyaki place was all flour. No sign of octopus in it. It pissed me off. Grilled oysters, so fresh they make your eyebrows raise. Am I wrong? Mr. Ethan, a man should eat more oysters. Trust me." And that Ethan, who patiently and meticulously replies to every message, always ready to help, I feel like I've never seen him before. "I want to eat fried chicken," he said. "The oil in that pot hasn't been changed for days. It's full of carcinogens. Eating that stuff is just asking for death." "I want to hit the popular night market," he added. "The ground's greasy, and the chaotic mix of smells is nauseating just thinking about it." Once I made a plate of oyster cucumber pancakes. He didn't touch a single bite of that dinner, the whole time scowling at me, his face like he was watching someone eat crap. "Wait until I put down my chopsticks," he told me. "The digestive organs of shellfish can't be fully cleaned. Eating this is like eating waste." I was choked up, unable to swallow or spit it out. In the days that followed, I didn't reply to any of his messages. I don't know where he learned that makeshift method, but he packed himself into a large box and sent it to my house, holding the shell-shaped cake he made for me. That day happened to coincide with a flight delay. When I got home, the cream had already melted. Ethan was drenched in sweat, his face flushed, and his lips dry and peeling. I was both angry and scared. If it weren't for the sudden cancellation of the dinner appointment, he could have been buried with both himself and the suitcase by tomorrow. Since then, I never brought up the things he didn't like in front of him again. Now look, it's truly laughable. The guy who once looked down on oysters with disdain would later willingly swallow the very thing he hated the most. The more ridiculous part is that while they were wandering the night market, I had just finished an appendectomy and was lying in the hospital. He despises the filth of hospitals, yet he carelessly covers himself in grease and smoke. Turns out I've unknowingly worn this green hat for so long. When I walked out of Ethan's study, I was holding his computer hard drive in my hand. The study was now in complete disarray, all smashed to pieces by my hammer, reduced to pulp. Anyway, the downstairs apartment has never been sold, so I'm not worried about anyone complaining I'm disturbing the peace. Violence might not solve problems, but it can relieve hatred. On the shelf was a ceramic cup made by Sophie, smashed. A hand-stitched blanket by Sophie was draped over the chair. The drawer contained the fruit tea bag Sophie had sent, which I smashed along with the drawer. On the table were the scented candles, a strangely designed picture frame, a poorly painted oil painting, a pink mouse pad, all scattered around. Everything was telling me this space that I was never allowed to enter has already been invaded by others. Since it's dirty, I no longer want it. The entire study was restored to its bare state, and indeed, it looked much more pleasant. I called my best friend Mia. Mia helped me prepare a divorce agreement. Mia didn't say more than necessary, only asked, "How will the property be divided? The company belongs to me, leave some cash for him, and overall the bottom line has to be 70%. I'll have my assistant send you the asset list shortly." Is he really that cheap? That's not like you, Wendy. She knows me well. I won't let him keep that 30% either. I took apart his computer hard drive. All his important data was here. In business, who doesn't have a few skeletons in their closet? First, I'll draw a line with him. Then it won't be too late to take the next step. Mia sneered. Now that's more like it. I still don't know you. If you can put up with such a boring person, it must be true love. Wanting a divorce in the middle of the night, he must have done something truly awful. No worries, there are plenty of guys out there. If you change him, sis has your back. This is the perk of having a supportive best friend. Before the wedding, Mia handed me a very detailed prenuptial agreement, and at that moment, Ethan didn't even glance at it and just signed it without a second thought. He looked at me with determination and said, Wendy, don't worry, I hate dirty things the most. So, in my lifetime, I'll never touch anyone else. Thinking of this, I closed my eyes. I once chose him because of his cleanliness. I'd rather endure his dullness, sharp tongue, and numerous flaws. Just for the sake of gambling, a person won't go against their instincts to do the most detestable thing. I lost the bet. It turns out that this thing called obsessive cleanliness can also give way to stimulation. Bitterness and heartache lingered that night. Starting tomorrow, all that would remain between Ethan and me was a game of strategy and struggle. Sophie's interactions and moments were completely silent all night. I repeatedly warned myself not to think about that disgusting couple anymore. But still, I couldn't help picturing how Ethan took care of her. The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. I wished I could slap the version of myself that walked into the operating room alone back then. Ethan sat in the spacious office, enjoying the air conditioning, complaining to Sophie about the pressure I had put on him. And I, flying between 2 or 3 cities a day, shuttling between airports, meetings, and dinner gatherings. When I came back, I had to take a shower before I could hug him. He said to Sophie, "You don't know, when Wendy came back today, her clothes were soaked with sweat, and I always feel there's a sour smell about her." Over the years, what I thought was us struggling side by side turned out to be just a joke. When Mia sent over the finalized divorce papers, the sky was already bright. It seemed she hadn't slept all night either. Sisters can support you by urging you to sign the papers today and get the certificate tomorrow. Go for it, President Wendy. I woke up to find it already noon. Ethan had never come back. What a pity. I really wanted to see his expression when he discovered the study was smashed and the computer torn apart, but it didn't matter. There would be plenty of times for him to break down in the future. I took the divorce papers to the company and walked straight to Ethan's office. Pushing open the door, Sophie was leaning close to Ethan's ear, whispering something. Ethan leaned slightly forward, the tenderness in his gaze almost spilling over. He wore a navy blue shirt paired with a silver-white tie. Sophie beside me was wearing a pearl-white silk blouse and a navy blue short skirt. What a pair of office lovers. With mutual affection, I was a bit taken with them. I tapped the ground with my heel, making 2 sounds. "How about I move a desk for you two?" Ethan straightened up and said, "What nonsense are you talking about? Acting all weird and mysterious, what does that even mean? It looks like you want a divorce." I slammed the divorce papers onto his chest and then sat down on the sofa. Sophie's eyes were red. "Miss Wendy, Mr. Ethan, and I didn't interrupt her, raising an eyebrow as I waited for her to explain. She pursed her lips and blinked a few times, falling silent. "If you bravely admit that you're trying to steal my spot, I'd actually think more highly of you. But this hesitant and coy demeanor was really off-putting. It's better to get back to work and make me a cup of coffee." I waved my hand as if shooing away a dog. Sophie looked at Ethan with a pleading gaze, but didn't get the response she hoped for. She was so angry she twisted her waist and stomped out of the office. Ethan finally found his voice. "Wendy, Sophie was just discussing your birthday gift with me. You were a bit too harsh and insulting her." I scoffed. "Ethan, we've been together for 6 years and you call me Wendy. But that secretary in the suit's so short it shows half her butt. You call her Sophie. Even when you give me gifts, you consult her about it. Do you also need her approval for what time you take a shower, turn off the lights, or go to the bathroom when you get home?" Ethan was very impatient. "Wendy, can you please stop using such foul language?" I rested my chin on my hand and replied nonchalantly, "I can't. If I swallow the curse words, I dirty myself." Ethan furrowed his brow. "Why are you being so extreme?" Sophie and I don't have the kind of relationship you think we do. The coffee is ready. Sophie walked in, her smile particularly radiant. The cup of coffee she handed over had a slight, delicate layer of transparent foam on the surface. I picked up my coffee cup and walked to Ethan's side. All right, I'm not being extreme now. I believe you. Ethan's expression brightened slightly. The corners of my mouth, which hadn't yet had the chance to curve up, were frozen in place by my next words. Then please start explaining where that shirt on you came from, where you slept last night, and who you went with to the internet-famous night market that I wanted to go to, but you looked down on. Sophie's cheeks were slightly flushed, and her eyes sparkled as she looked at Ethan. Ethan lowered his eyes and said nothing. It seemed that this explanation couldn't be made in front of the involved parties. I smiled playfully. Now that you've signed the divorce papers, can't you two be a couple? No need to involve me, a mere extra, right? Wendy, you don't need to be so sarcastic. I've never had any intimate contact with Secretary Sophie. You're a woman too. Why tarnish her reputation out of jealousy? He has always been aloof and refined. I once joked that he had that standard, polite expression welded onto his face. Now, he raised his voice because of my offensive words towards Sophie, his face still showing anger. Jealousy? Slander? I handed the coffee cup to Ethan. Here, drink it. Ethan took the coffee cup suspiciously and brought it to his lips. Don't drink it. Sophie lunged over, and the scalding coffee splashed all over both of them. Ethan tore open his shirt, buttons scattering everywhere, his pale abdomen already burned bright red. Sophie was completely oblivious to herself, frantically patting Ethan's body. Mr. Ethan, are you okay? I'm sorry. That coffee wasn't meant for you to drink. He didn't shy away from the hands Sophie had placed on him. Instead, there was a hint of scrutiny in his gaze. What have you done? I picked up the coffee cup and played with it. I just felt it looked familiar. Turns out this cup is a pair with the one I smashed in the study yesterday. There's nothing much to it. She probably just spat a little inside. Ethan turned pale instantly, covering his mouth and gagging. I threw the coffee cup back onto the table. Oh, come on, why such a big reaction? Swapping saliva isn't something new for you all. Miss Wendy, don't slander me. Defamation! I slapped her across the face. I've really been trying to give you face, so why do you insist on rejecting it? I grabbed her wrist and threw her aside. She pulled down Ethan's hand that was covering his mouth and slapped him. This time, the force was greater, and my hand ached faintly from the impact. Ethan, is the leftover takeout from others tasty? Is the double cup drink from the night market delicious? Is her bed softer and more comfortable? Ethan was completely flustered. Wendy, don't get me wrong. I just want to practice accepting the things you like. I really have nothing going on with her. His gaze was sincere, and his expression earnest. I could see that he believed he hadn't lied. That made it even more ridiculous. Ethan, if I feel our married life isn't harmonious, can I also go out and find someone else to practice with? When I was sick, you said the hospital was dirty. When she was sick, you served her like a dutiful son and grandson. How can you still have the face to say this is because of me? You're already disgusting, being emotionally unfaithful in your marriage. I never expected you could be even more disgusting. Ethan shook his head with a wry smile. Wendy, why do you have to be so harsh? During our Cold War, Sophie told me that I disliked everything you loved, which would hurt you. That's why I asked her to help me practice adapting. We really didn't cross any boundaries. His earnest and heartfelt demeanor made me seem unreasonable. Sophie couldn't take it anymore. With red eyes, she threw the cup and ran out. I shook my head. Ethan, you're even deceiving yourself. You actually used the excuse of doing it for my own good as a reason for your closeness with others. You're foolish yourself, yet you think others are even more foolish than you, don't you? I was so angry that I laughed. You filled your stomach with the pre-made meal delivery she sent, forgetting that 3 years ago, I had prepared a whole table of dishes at home, waiting for you to come and eat. You complained to her that when I got home, I'd collapse on the sofa and it would take me half an hour to shower, and that it was disgusting enough to make you feel nauseous. And that was 3 years ago. And that time we argued was 2 years ago. Were you a prophet to have approached her in advance? Ethan pressed his lips tightly together, his gaze somewhat evasive. That was all just work-related contact before. I randomly grabbed a folder and slammed it down on his head. Work? Sophie used to be someone else's life assistant. She can talk to you about work, my ass. The few researchers are all single, but they've never contacted her outside of work. What about you? You've spent countless nights at her place. I see you now, like seeing maggots in a dry toilet. It makes me want to vomit. If you still consider yourself a person, sign that divorce agreement now, and let's part ways amicably. Ethan took a few steps forward, trying to grab my hand. I turned my hand and slapped him across the face. I said, sign it. His cheeks bore swollen fingerprints, his eyes were red, and his voice was somewhat choked. Wendy, I won't divorce you. We've been together for so many years. You can't just abandon me because I've occasionally gone out shopping with someone else. There was really nothing to say to such a person. Ethan, I'm only giving you one day. Either sign the papers so we can part ways amicably or don't sign, and I'll sue you. Either way, I can still divorce you, you disgusting thing. Ethan absolutely refused to sign the divorce papers. He also knew he had no compelling reason to keep me. He just held onto my sleeve tightly, looking at me with sorrowful eyes, pleading for me to give him another chance. What's the difference between this behavior and that of a scoundrel? I turned around and kicked him in his most vulnerable spot. Finally, I succeeded in making him let go. Ethan, stop bothering me. Just seeing your face reminds me of the food you swallowed with a smile, smeared with someone else's saliva, you're filthy inside and out. Where do you get the nerve to call yourself a neat freak? The one you should be most disgusted with is yourself, isn't it? He stood in front of me, trembling slightly, trying to reach out his hand to me like a helpless child. This was probably the image he wanted to convey. Unfortunately, a man who is 6'2" and nearly 30 years old, who has the courage to make mistakes but not the courage to admit them, truly fails to evoke any sympathy in me. I turned to leave, leaving him with my final words. Mia will send you a new copy of the divorce agreement. We'll meet at the Civil Affairs Bureau tomorrow. Mia, this busy person, drove over 300 kilometers to come and have a meal with me. She has always looked down on Ethan, constantly complaining to me about how he is so troublesome and hypocritical. I didn't sleep well yesterday, my eyes are a bit dark, and my face looks somewhat pale. Mia immediately noticed my haggard appearance and slammed her hand on the table, cursing Ethan. I told you he's a phony! What nonsense about being a high and mighty flower. I see him as nothing more than a piece of mold rotting by the roadside. After attacking Ethan, she didn't spare me either. Look at you, because of a man, you've wilted like this. You look like a frostbitten old eggplant. Where's your spirit? Where's your pride? Who the hell is Ethan? Just a blind man, that's all. If he gets dirty, throw him away. If you're tired of him, replace him. Is it worth your tears and suffering for him? Men are indeed not as good as sisters. Ethan and I chatted aimlessly for quite a while, scolding me one moment and begging for mercy the next. Yet he didn't notice that I looked unwell today. Mia cursed under her breath, her hands not idle, as she quickly peeled a few shrimp and pushed them towards me. Fresh sea shrimp, just off the boat. I had to work on them for a while before they agreed to help me prepare it, and there's over a pound of crab too. I made sure you could have a taste of something fresh, but now my car smells all fishy. Thinking of her precious iceberry pink Porsche, I felt a twinge of pain. Mia shot me a glance and said, "Oh, come on, look at you. I was just saying it casually. I'm not that picky." Back in my hometown, no matter how expensive the car is, I still have to use it to haul cabbages and potatoes for my mom. Now it hurts even more, that interior cost. Quite a bit extra. Stop talking about the car. I'm not just here to bring you seafood. Stay with me tonight. You're quite reckless, and if a fight breaks out, you'll be at a disadvantage. However, that being said, if he refuses to agree to the divorce, what do you plan to do? Although it's not impossible to get a divorce through a lawsuit, the process is incredibly lengthy. During that time, half of the money you earn will still belong to him. I rolled my eyes. Am I really that unreliable in your eyes? Just wait and see. When Ethan called me, his voice trembled uncontrollably. Wendy, what have you done? Where's my computer hard drive? I glanced at the time. It was 4 a.m. Even though I had clearly stated that I wanted a divorce, He still didn't come home all night. But it's okay. I didn't go home either. Don't worry, I didn't see anything. As long as you sign the agreement to divorce me today, I will never look again. How about that? The sound of shattering glass came from the other end of the phone. Turns out, he can lose control of his emotions too. Stop messing around. That hard drive is very important to me, and having it in your hands is of no use at all. Besides, it's my property. His embarrassing demeanor made me very happy. This indicated that there is indeed something very important on that hard drive. Ethan, at least for now, I'm still your legal spouse. Aside from your toothbrush, socks, and underwear, I have half the right to dispose of everything else you own. If you have a problem with that, call the police. For reasons unknown, whether out of anger or something else, Ethan's teeth chattered. I laughed even happier. By 9 in the morning, Ethan wore a sullen expression as he and I carried 2 certificates inside and then came out with the same 2 certificates. He might have given up acting. His tone was icy. Wendy, do you think you can find someone better than me after leaving? Don't dream. After the divorce, you're just a dirty secondhand item. Do you think I don't dislike Sophie but only dislike you? You act like a strong woman every day, rarely at home. Who knows what you're doing out there? How did you manage to close those deals? Those who understand, understand. I took a bottle of eye drops out of my bag and put some in my eyes. Just then, Mia walked over, shot Ethan a glare, and asked me, "What's going on? Did he make you cry?" I shook my head. If you see something dirty, hurry up and wash your eyes. Some people are like monkeys themselves, always thinking others are just as hairy. It's quite disgusting. Wendy, why do you always speak so harshly? In this marriage of ours, is it really all my fault? Can't you look for reasons within yourself? I looked for it. I must have made a mistake. Ethan's expression softened a bit. I was wrong to be blind. All these years, I treated you like a person. I never expected that you didn't want to be human at all. Mia pointed at Ethan's nose and shouted, "How can there be such a disgusting man like you in this world? What kind of toad have you turned into? Why do you have to look for reasons within yourself? Why don't you look for reasons within yourself? The number of polar bears is decreasing. Global sea levels are rising, and my husky was constipated yesterday. Shouldn't you be asking yourself if all of this is your fault? After all, just breathing in this world is a great sin." As I pulled Mia along, she twisted her head and stomped her feet, cursing loudly. Mia furrowed her brows at me and said, "No, you can't possibly still have any lingering feelings for this thing, can you?" I shot her a glance. How is that possible? I used to tolerate him because I respected his way of life. However, since his so-called cleanliness has exceptions, to me, this is him deliberately humiliating me because of his own incompetence. Ethan thought that as long as he got a divorce, everything would be settled, but there's no such thing as an easy way out in this world. Ethan's hard drive indeed holds quite a few secrets. Mia and I sat in front of the computer, and after looking through the materials, we exchanged a glance. It's so terrifying. He constantly complains about others being dirty, but it turns out he's the one who is truly filthy. He thought that after the divorce was finalized, I would either destroy the hard drive or return it to its rightful owner. After all, I have always kept my word when speaking to others. But he is not human, so in the face of his fury, I remained indifferent. He was going wild on the other end of the phone, screaming at me like a madman, hurling the most vile words as verbal assaults. I lay on the beach in Fiji, tossed my phone aside, and stuffed grapes into my mouth. Seeing that I wasn't responding, he began to plead desperately, recounting the past and playing the emotional card. "Wendy, we were so good together back then. How did it end up like this now?" This time I responded, "Because humans and beasts cannot intermarry." Mia shook her phone at me, and I knew the police had already located him. Some things you should still discuss with the investigators. When I was dismantling his computer, I was just thinking that I should be able to find some flaws or incriminating evidence inside. I never expected that there would be evidence of him luring female college students for powerful figures on his hard drive. He might want to hold these things in his hands to blackmail others. No wonder he suspected that I engaged in some sort of monetary and sexual transaction. It turned out he was the one feeling guilty about being a thief. No wonder he valued Sophie so much. She helped thread the needle in the middle, and many girls were deceived by her, ruined by her hands. The bond between partners is naturally closer than that of ordinary couples. This hard drive, no matter where it appears, is a disaster for him. I originally planned to take revenge on him fiercely to make him return to the way he was when we first met, that state of having nothing at all. But now, he and Sophie should reunite in the cell first. As for how a person with obsessive cleanliness survives in a cell where there is no privacy, who knows? Upon returning from vacation, I had some free time and decided to visit Sophie. I'm really curious why she's so devoted to a man. Being a mistress for him is a moral issue. It's quite strange that he broke the law for her. Sophie was diagnosed with liver cancer in prison. Her hair is now dry, and her complexion is yellow, no longer pretending to be pitiful. After hearing my question, he actually laughed a bit wildly. Why? For money, of course. What else could it be? I've been a mistress for so long, if not for money. What else could it be for? That thing? Where can't you find it? I have no education nor any real skills. The only things I can offer are doing housework and cooking. With just these, when will I ever be able to get ahead? We were very discreet in what we did. Usually, even when talking about these matters, we used code words. I never expected that due to a tiny oversight, we would fall into your hands. I never expected that due to a tiny oversight, we would fall into your hands. But Wendy, you really are ruthless. After all, you were once married. He doesn't truly love me. Don't you feel even a little bit of compassion for sending him in here to suffer so decisively? I didn't reply to her. Let her think for herself. She's already in jail. Can't she figure this out? Even if our relationship is harmonious and he loves me dearly, I cannot protect him just because he has broken the law. Moreover, a pear that has been thrown into a cesspit, even if it hasn't fallen in completely, is still disgusting. As for Ethan, he has been playing me for a fool all these years. I can't just do nothing. I told the girls about his imprisonment and used some connections to lock Ethan up with a group of people with peculiar preferences. Then tell those people about the crimes Ethan committed. This is not considered illegal or disorderly. It's merely respecting some reasonable needs of the offender. Every once in a while, I would show his miserable state to the girls who were furious and upset. It's like raising a virtual pet from afar. And every time I see him, there are new scars on his body. Wounds can heal, and the heaviness in the heart can also dissipate. Although scars will remain in the end, since life must go on, seeing the culprit receive their comeuppance does provide some relief to the repressed feelings. Ethan was in a state of repeating curses, weeping, and pleading for mercy. This must be his own problem, unrelated to what he did with others. Those people just communicated with him a few times in a friendly manner. What wrong did they do? Unfortunately, he still did not wait for my personal revenge. He died of cardiac arrest caused by a foreign object invading the rectum. His parents were ashamed of him and did not acknowledge that they had such a son. I have always been soft-hearted, so I took the initiative to handle his funeral. With a few girls who were gradually becoming more cheerful, they carefully selected the phallus latrine and, one handful at a time, scattered the ashes inside. Originally, Mia had planned to have each person spit once, but the conditions simply don't allow it. The smell is too strong, making it impossible for us to keep our eyes open. I can only sincerely hope that he will like this homecoming. As for me, I can only enjoy the beauty of the world with Mia, along with the company that is about to go public.